My younger sister was about to marry the perfect man, a rich, charming doctor who was completely in love with her. My parents were over the moon. I was the only one who felt something was wrong, that he was too good to be true. What I discovered, hours before the wedding, wasn't just a betrayal. It was an elaborate fraud, a web of lies so shocking that it turned the happiest day of her life into a scandal that exposed the dark truth behind our perfect family. My name is Clara, and I've always had a complicated relationship with my younger sister, Sophia. Our parents, owners of a successful chain of art galleries, always raised us with a comparative ruler. I was the stable daughter, the pragmatic lawyer. Sophia was the star, the free-spirited artist who, according to them, needed more support and protection. In practice, this meant her mistakes were forgiven as artistic eccentricities, while mine were seen as character flaws. If she overspent, it was because she needed inspiration. If I was cautious with money, I was stingy. It was exhausting, but I loved her, and I accepted the dynamic. A year ago, Sophia announced she was engaged. The fiancé, Raphael, seemed to have stepped out of a fairy tale. He was a successful neurosurgeon from a traditional family, incredibly handsome, and above all, completely devoted to her. He showered her with expensive gifts, constantly praised her in public, and seemed to applaud her every whim. My parents were ecstatic. It was the wedding they had always dreamed of for their favorite daughter. I, on the other hand, felt a pang of strangeness from the beginning. There was something about Raphael that seemed rehearsed. His smiles were too perfect, his declarations of love a little too theatrical. I tried to ignore it, accusing myself of being jealous. After all, my love life was a desert compared to her epic romance. But the feeling persisted. The wedding planning was a spectacle of extravagance, fully funded by my parents. Sophia demanded the best of everything, the most expensive venue, the most renowned designer, the rarest flowers. Raphael agreed to everything, always with the same answer: whatever my queen wants. He never had an opinion of his own, which I found bizarre for a man who was supposedly so accomplished. I started to watch more closely. I noticed that, despite being a neurosurgeon, he seemed to have a very superficial knowledge of medicine. At a dinner, when a family friend who is a doctor tried to start a technical conversation with him, Raphael awkwardly changed the subject. Another time, I overheard him on the phone, using slang and a tone of voice that didn't at all match the polished image he projected. They were small things, inconsistencies that left me unsettled. I tried to share my concerns with my parents. "Mom, don't you think Raphael is a little too perfect?" I asked. She dismissed me with a wave of her hand. "Oh, Clara, you and your skepticism. You're just not used to seeing your sister so happy. Stop being jealous." The word jealous was the weapon they always used to silence me. I decided to investigate on my own. It was easier than I thought. As a lawyer, I have access to certain databases. I searched for Dr. Rafael Montero in the medical board records. Nothing. I searched for his name in academic articles, in hospital registries. Nothing. The man, professionally, did not exist. My blood ran cold. If he wasn't a doctor, who was he? I deepened my search, this time looking for public records, anything with that name and date of birth. And that's when I found it. It wasn't a medical record. It was a criminal record. A small file for fraud, from 5 years ago. The photo on the record was unmistakably him. The name, however, was different. Ricardo Vargas. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I kept digging. Ricardo Vargas was an actor. A B-list theater actor, with a few commercials and minor roles in series, but nothing noteworthy. He wasn't a neurosurgeon from a wealthy family. He was a mediocre actor with a history of petty scams. The truth hit me like a wave. The perfection, the charisma, the devotion. It was all a performance. My sister wasn't engaged to a doctor. She was engaged to an actor who was playing the role of his life. But why? Was he a con man trying to steal my family's money? Or was it something even stranger? The idea that Sophia herself could be involved didn't even cross my mind. She could be spoiled, but I didn't think her capable of something so sinister. The wedding was only 3 days away. I was panicking. I had to tell my parents. I scheduled an emergency dinner with them, without Sophia or Raphael present. I sat across from them with a folder containing all the evidence I had printed: the criminal record, Ricardo Vargas's acting portfolio, the lack of medical records. Sophia's fiancé is not who he says he is, I said, pushing the folder across the table. My father opened the folder, glanced at the papers, and then started to laugh. Not a laugh of relief, but one of scorn. "Oh, Clara," he said, shaking his head. "Always so dramatic. How far has your jealousy gone? Did you hire someone to forge these documents? My mother didn't even look at the papers. Your sister is so happy. Why can't you just be happy for her? Why do you always have to be the center of attention with your conspiracy theories?" They didn't believe me. They refused to believe. The image of the perfect son-in-law was more important to them than the truth that was right in front of their eyes. They accused me of trying to sabotage the wedding out of envy. I left the restaurant devastated and furious. They were blind. And I was alone. I knew I had to warn Sophia, even if she wouldn't believe me either. The next day, I went to her apartment. She was in the middle of a final makeup trial. When I said we needed to talk, she rolled her eyes. I showed her the same evidence. Her reaction was even worse than my parents'. She didn't laugh. She exploded with rage. "I can't believe you," she screamed. "You hate my happiness so much that you're willing to make up these horrible lies? You're sick, Clara. Sick with jealousy." She tore up the papers and threw them in my face. "Get out of my house," she hissed. "And don't you dare show up at my wedding." I was thrown out, discredited by the one person I was trying to protect. I was on the verge of giving up. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was crazy. The night before the wedding, I was in my apartment, drowning my sorrows, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. A hesitant woman's voice asked, "Is this Clara?" "Yes, who's speaking?" I replied. "My name is Anna," the voice said. "I'm Ricardo Vargas's agent. And I think we have a big problem." I sat bolt upright. His agent? She told me that Ricardo or Raphael had been missing for 2 days, ever since I had exposed him to Sophia. He wasn't answering his calls, not responding to texts. And most importantly, the final check for his service had not yet been paid. "Service?" I asked, confused. "Yes," said Anna. "The perfect fiancé service. Hired and paid for by your sister, Sophia." It took me a second to process. What? Sophia hired him? Of course, Anna said. "You didn't think he was a real con man, did you? Ricardo is an actor. Sophia hired him over a year ago. She created the character of Dr. Rafael Montero, wrote the script, directed every scene. She wanted the perfect fiancé to impress her parents and friends, and she was willing to pay for it. The plan was for him to break up with her dramatically right after the honeymoon, leaving her as the heartbroken victim. The truth was so bizarre, so narcissistic, that it was almost comical. My sister hadn't been deceived by a con man. She had hired one. The whole romance, all the devotion, was a play she herself had financed in order to be the center of the universe. And my attempt to save her had ruined the third act finale. "The problem," the agent continued, "is that Sophia is refusing to pay the remainder of the contract since you ruined the performance. And Ricardo is scared. He thinks your family might be dangerous." And then, she sent me something that changed everything again. It was a copy of the contract between Sophia and Ricardo. And in it, there was a confidentiality clause with a penalty for breach of contract that was astronomical. And there was another, even more interesting clause: if the service was interrupted by external interference, the actor was entitled to an emotional damages bonus to be paid by the person who caused the interference, namely me. I was contractually responsible for paying the actor my sister hired to pretend to be her fiancé. On the day of the wedding, I didn't go as an unwanted guest. I went as an interested party. I arrived as the guests were being seated. My parents, upon seeing me, made a scene, trying to have me removed. But I had my own trump card. "I suggest you let me stay," I told my father calmly. "Unless you want the bride to be sued for breach of contract in the middle of the ceremony." I showed him the copy of the contract. He read it, his face turning from anger to the pale shock of pure horror. He let me in. The ceremony began. The music played. The doors opened. And Sophia entered, stunning in her white dress, her face a mask of radiant happiness. But the groom was not at the altar. In his place stood the agent, Anna, holding a tablet. When Sophia reached the altar and saw that Raphael wasn't there, her smile faltered. Anna, with impeccable professionalism, turned the tablet towards the audience. On the screen was a pre-recorded video message from Ricardo, the actor. "Dearest Sophia and esteemed guests," he began in his best leading man voice, "I regret to inform you that I will be unable to attend today. Due to a breach of contract and a hostile work environment, my agent has advised me to end my performance as Dr. Rafael Montero. It has been a pleasure playing this role. I wish Sophia all the best in her future productions." The room exploded into pandemonium. Sophia looked at me from across the aisle, her face twisted with hatred. My parents looked like they had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. The humiliation was total, public, and spectacular. The wedding, obviously, didn't happen. What did happen was the implosion of my family. The story of the actor-fiancé leaked to the press, becoming a legend in the city's social circles. My parents, for damage control, tried to blame me, the jealous sister. But the contract I had was irrefutable proof of Sophia's charade. They had no way to deny it. Their reputation, which they valued so much, was permanently stained. Sophia had a nervous breakdown. The reality of her own machinations finally hit her. She refused to pay the contractual penalty, and the actor's agency, as promised, sued her. My parents, to avoid further scandal, ended up paying the debt, a high price for their daughter's fantasy. And me? I used my own clause in the contract. I sued Sophia for including me as a financially responsible party in her fraudulent scheme. I didn't want the money. I wanted a statement. The case was settled out of court. The condition of the settlement? That my parents would fund the creation of a foundation in my name, a foundation that provides scholarships for talented but under-resourced young artists. The kind of artist Sophia pretended to be. I distanced myself from my family. The damage was too deep to be fixed. Sometimes my mother calls, trying for a fragile reconciliation. My father has never spoken to me again. And Sophia, from what I've heard, is in therapy, trying to piece together an identity she first fabricated and then shattered. My victory was not sweet. It was bitter and complicated. I didn't destroy my sister out of envy. I just held up a mirror to her and my family, and they couldn't stand the reflection. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It simply burns everything to the ground. And from the scorched earth, it's up to each person to decide what will grow in its place. In mine, I decided to plant a garden for other dreamers, in the hope that their stories will have a happier ending than mine.